Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week for ANN In Depth. We are changing things up a little bit, and Sam and I are going to come right now, and we're going to talk a little bit. We're so excited to talk to you this week about gaming. Sam, we just finished our conversation with Mariah and Richard, who are young people who work with you on the Heroes game. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. Well, Rich has been part of my youth group. I have a teens youth group that we meet, regularly. And he is really trying to get close to God for years, and he's gone through various degrees of Christian education, and he's a great Seventh-day Adventist kid. And I saw the potential that he could help us with quality assurance, which is that part of the game that tests to see if the developers did what they wanted to do and to make sure that it's working on multiple devices. And he wanted to explore a career in that. And I thought, I've got the perfect opportunity for you. Come and help us. So he started to help us with that. And Morea, she is brilliant with communities naturally. And she understands this new community technology, new for me at the time, called Discord. And she is now managing all of our Discord community. So the conversation about games and about how to present the Three Angels messages in this new format is a conversation that we must have. And I'm glad that they've helped us to fix it. And I really hope people like the interview.
Yeah, I was really excited to meet both of them because you've been bragging on your team for so long. So it's exciting for me to meet them. And one of the things I loved about this conversation, which we're going to get to really soon, was that it's so easy to talk about all the negative aspects of games and gaming. And we did touch on that.
Yeah.
But we also talked about the benefits that come from this community of gamers. And that was so exciting to see. I don't know if you felt the same way.
Absolutely. There are good things and bad things to talk about. We talked about both of those, and hopefully parents and teens and so on will be able to make sense of it in a godly way.
Right. So we're going to jump into our conversation now. If you are a gamer, or if you have children, or if teenagers, and we encourage you to have them watch this with us. If you have concerns about gaming, maybe watch. And at the end, I think Mariah gave us really good advice for parents whose kids may be into games to get involved and to find a way to connect with your children through this. So we're going to jump right in, and we will see you later. Hi, Richard and Morea. Thank you so much for being with Sam and I. I'm going to jump right in. We're going to jump right into our conversation. You both work with us, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, on a project that Sam has been working with. I mean, for how long, Sam? A really long. Heroes 2. But Heroes, you've been working on this for a long time.
Like 7 years, 8 years, yeah.
7 or 8 years. We're going to start with Morea, and then we're going to go to Richard. Why were you inspired to jump into the project Heroes 2?
Well, for me, my mom has been really connected with Mr. Sam, especially during this whole quarantine and Corona thing going on. So she saw that he was looking for something, and I filled that need, and I kind of was just adopted into the community.
Cool. Richard?
I've known Pastor Sam for maybe 2 or so years now. So he's been a good friend of mine. And I remember actually playing the first Heroes way back when and being like, this is so cool. This is the best Bible trivia game that we have right now. And lately I've been kind of thinking what do I even want for my career? And he brought up this opportunity. And so this is kind of really guiding, do I want to go into the gaming industry or maybe even help the Adventist community by bringing a game such as Heroes to everyone. So that's how I was becoming a part of the project.
That's awesome. Sam, before we get too much further down the road, Heroes is a Bible trivia game that the Seventh-day Adventist Church, along with Hope Channel and several other of our entities, has decided to produce. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Heroes is? And then we'll get into why we decided to get into gaming. Sam?
Yeah, sure. Well, Heroes came when many years ago, the first version of the game, when we realized that everybody was on their phone and they were playing games. So we thought, hold on a minute, we have to put the Bible back where people are, and they're on their screen. So we're going to focus on that. And this came at first with a bit of a hit, because this whole thing about gaming, Christians get really nervous. In fact, whenever there's a new technology, whenever people are doing new things, there is usually a fear that that this is not from God. And when radio came out, there were many Christians. They were like, the radio is from the devil. And the devil must have looked at it and thought, it's mine? How generous. I'll use it. And he was using it until later somebody said, hold on a minute, we should be using this mass communication tool for the gospel. And in the case of the Adventist Church, HMS Richards came and said, yeah, we're going to use it for the gospel. And he started preaching, and it was wonderful. 40 years later, we started with Adventist World Radio. And then in the 50s came television. And guess what Christians did? They looked at television and they said, it's from the devil. And again, the devil said, I'm going to use it then if it's mine. And he used it. And then later, you have some pioneers like George Vanderman, who decided, you know what, this is a mass communication tool. We're here to proclaim the three angels' messages, and we're going to use this tool here for that. And he did. 40 years after him, we started Hope Channel International in the 90s. The purpose was to use television for the proclamation of the gospel. Well, the same thing with gaming. As soon as gaming came out and it grew and so on, people looked at violent games and other kinds of non-godly games, and they said, this is from the devil. And the same thing here. The problem is not in the tool. So we realized that gaming was an important part of this 21st century. And a group of friends back then decided to come together and create the first Heroes. It took 3 years, and we launched it in 2013. And the game was played like over 10 million minutes, from different parts of the world. And it's interesting that a recent research about 3 years ago showed that of all the Bible gaming genres, Bible trivia was the one that people were searching for the most. And to the tune of like a 250,000 people globally searching for Bible games, Bible trivia, and Bible quiz. And we thought, this is it. We have to revive Heroes so that all the people that are searching for Bible content, we can present to them solid Bible content in a language that they understand. And that's why Heroes 2 Heroes was revived to the second version, now in 3D and so on. And I've got here the website. Let me just show that here. Here it is. So this is the Heroes 2. You can see it's a very Marvel-like, very comic book-like style of heroics. And it's not that Noah looked like this. That's not the point, but it's to show that Noah was strong. It's a language, a visual language. And the new game is fantastic. It's got multiplayer and all sorts of different things that people are going to love. So that's Heroes, Jennifer.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'm so glad to have you guys all looking at it and working on it. My dad actually played it for the first time. I think I texted you, Sam, last week, and he really loved it. And I love the idea that if we're all going to be on our phones, we might as well be doing something good. And it's really great that you, because I'm sure there's a lot of parents who, especially on Sabbath with their kids, they're playing games and whatever, and they want them to be, if they're going to be on their phones, at least do something with Sabbath that will help them learn. For the purpose of our conversation, what I would love to talk about is the difference in gaming. We're going to be talking about gaming in general. Richard and Moriah, you both, I think, as we've been talking before, you both play video games. So I'd really love to know, there's a difference, right, in the games that we choose to play. There's a difference between if I'm sitting in line at the DMV, which is the Department of Motor Vehicles here in this area. If I'm sitting in line, or if I'm kind of bored and I play Candy Crush on my phone, or is that different than a trivia game like Heroes or a crossword puzzle on my phone? Is that different than when we talk about gaming at our computer with computer games or a Nintendo type of situation, or I think it's the PS5 just came out. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The PS5.
Yeah.
Look at you, Jennifer.
5 or 15. I don't know. And the people who watch this program regularly know that I am in my heart like 200 years old, and I have no actual connection to technology. So um, so I is there a difference between the games that we play on these different systems and the types of games and how they impact us? If you guys would speak to that.
Well, I know that you can kind of basically divide gaming into three main categories. You've got mobile gaming, you've got computer gaming, and you've got dedicated console gaming. Mobile gaming ends up having a lot more mobile ads. It's got a lot of fast-paced things where you receive like that dopamine and you receive that reward very quickly. You accomplish your goal, and that's the end of it. It's very simple and you can understand what's going on very easily. Most of the time, they're also free. Then you also have computer gaming, which is much more expansive and covers a lot more content. Console gaming, I'm not as familiar with because I don't personally own a console, but that is also purchased games and they have a lot of content in them.
So it's console gaming. Is that sort of like, and is that what like the Nintendo is, or?
I think you can consider a Nintendo Switch a console.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that type of gaming. And how have you guys seen the difference in how people interact with these different types of games?
I actually don't see that big of a difference when people play a game on mobile or computer or even console, because there are some games like, say, Minecraft or even Fortnite. Those games have grown so big that they're on all platforms. They're on every single iOS and Android device, on any kind of PC, and every single console has them. So I think to say that there's a big difference is not, I wouldn't say is correct, because sure, on mobile games you have games that give you like this instant gratification of, yes, I did this small mission and now I feel kind of good, I can go about my day. Whereas console or computer gaming, you have to like sit down and spend hours grinding and trying to complete a mission or something. But at the end of the day, I think it's more about what the game has that tells the difference, rather than, oh, well, mobile gaming is different than a computer game.
That's interesting. You know, I had a certain idea of what video games were, and then during the pandemic, the quarantine, I was staying with my sister and her husband and my niece and my nephew. And one of the things my nephew got into doing, there's a game called Mario Maker.
Yeah,
and
Super Mario Maker.
Super Mario Maker, and you can build your own gaming world.
Yeah.
Right? So like this is something he will spend hours doing. This child cannot sit still for like 5 minutes because he is a 6-year-old boy. And yet he will sit and build these like elaborate video game worlds that are actually so hard no one can play them except for maybe him and his sister. But I thought, wow, that's such a creative way to spend your time. And also now he says, oh, I want to build video games as, you know, a career. And that's something, Sam, that we're looking for, right?
Yes, I'll sign him up.
Yeah.
We'll start training him now.
Actually, Moriah, you said something to me that was interesting, and I've heard Sam talk about this a lot. And I think, Richard, you could probably, all three of you could talk about this, and that is the dopamine, because you talked about this a little. You feel good. What is this dopamine rush that I've heard Sam talk about so much, and Moriah, you brought it up? Is this like in those short games when we complete like a, you know, if I'm playing, I don't know, I don't play a lot of it. Like I do play Candy Crush sometimes. Is that like I complete a level, or if I'm doing a coloring page or a crossword puzzle or something, I complete a puzzle, and that's that they connect to that rush of finishing and succeeding at something. Is that what you're talking about, or is it something different than that?
I mean, I have not played Candy Crush in a very long time, but I'm also not sure if dopamine is necessarily the right scientific word to be using for this, but it's kind of like that feeling of like happiness after you completed a whole Candy Crush game and you got all 3 stars and you're like, you did really good and you're proud of yourself. Or like whenever you're playing a computer game in like, we'll say Minecraft, which covers all 3 types of gaming, and you finish this really, really good build and you look back and you just take a step back and you see this and you're like, I accomplished this. It's kind of like a feeling of accomplishment mixed with just like being proud of yourself and what you've accomplished.
Yeah. for sure. Like I've had the like I have this group called the Champions Lounge, and we'll always say that we're popping off, which is kind of like a say for gamers that are like you did it, like you're like excited. You're basically like you don't know whether to laugh or cry or just yell. Like it's just popping off, and so it's definitely that bit of dopamine that is a lot of is like trying to think. It's not necessarily dopamine, but just that excitement of you did it, like that accomplishment, like Mariah was saying.
So it's a good game will involve all 5 hormones that we produce and motivate us. So dopamine is the objective hormone. You know, there is a mission to be completed, and you go and complete that mission, and it's the motivation of getting it. But our body's sensitive to dopamine, very sensitive to dopamine. And and this is one of the side effects of playing too many games, when you have too many quick gratifications, when you're playing a game and you're producing so much dopamine as you're getting these constant hits of dopamine throughout a long extended period of time, suddenly when someone you love does something for you or asks you to do something, that produces just a little bit of dopamine, which normally you would be motivated to accomplish. But now that you've been hit with dopamine for so many hours, then you're not sensitive to it anymore. You've developed a resistance to it. And that's why it's important to have periods during each day that you have no extra dopamine that are added. And every week you take a Sabbath from this dopamine thing. So the Sabbath is extremely important for you to be free of dopamine. And on the one hand, yes, Heroes is great on Sabbath because it focuses on the Bible. But on the other hand, it is built to produce dopamine. You know, all the special effects that come in when you finish a series of 12 questions, there are things on the screen that will make you feel good and are dopamine inducing. And all of that is there in the game. Otherwise, it's not a game, because the whole purpose is to have this motivation to go to the next mission and the next level and so on. So that's dopamine. It's both good and bad. Now, the pain that you experience going through it is endorphins, usually exercise. You know, it's painful, but you're going to pursue it and you're going to make it happen and so on. And the thing about games is that they can teach you grit. You know what Richard was talking about. You're playing a phase here, and you can't beat the boss, and there is a particular way that you need to do it, and you can't do it, but you don't give up on it. And I have an experience with games. I've been focused on games forever, you know, all the way back to Atari, you know, in the 90s, where, you know, the rally, you had to play in a certain way in order to win and so on. And then all the games thereafter, you don't give up. And when you finally break through and you manage to finish that level, to beat the boss or whatever it is, there is a constant rush of euphoria. It's like, I did it finally. And you want to tell everybody. Now, back in the day, there was no telling anybody because there was no networking. It was just you and your PC or your console, whatever that was. And then we come to another important hormones. Now the hormones of connections. You have serotonin, and then you have oxytocin. So serotonin is the idea of respect. When you feel that you are higher in a dominance hierarchy, that releases serotonin, which is important for our health in all sorts of ways. It helps us to sleep, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a hormone that is tracked across animals, various animals. It's not just a human hormone, but we're very sensitive to dominance hierarchies. And a game is all but that. You know, that's exactly what it is. You level up and you can see each other's levels, and you can see that within the community, you're higher than the others, especially the mass multiplayer games and so on. And it matters. And then you get it's fun to win by yourself. But it's amazing when you've got a team of players and you win together, even though you're in different parts of the world or next to each other in an esports competition or whatever. And I know, Richard, you take part in esports in some way. So that's another hormone. And finally, cortisol, the idea of you letting other people down and the idea of responsibility and being, you know, taking things seriously and et cetera. So those are the hormones that a good game will incorporate. And all of them can be both positive and negative. For example, serotonin. 16-year-old guy, it doesn't fit into the rest of his peers. The girls reject him because he's weird. And then you have, the other guys don't play around with him that much. But when he goes home and he turns on his PC or his console, he's a warrior and he's winning. And this means that he is attractive to the digital, to the virtual realm, much more than the real world. And that's how you get 30, 35, 40-year-olds who are still in their parents' home playing video games and never quite come out. Why? Because the real world is not as attractive. I don't get, very well success in the real world. But online, I am the man, and this is one of the great attractions, which is a really dangerous thing for you to imagine that the virtual world is better than the real world. So that's one of the pitfalls for gaming. Anyway.
It's really interesting because we hear in the news and in our society all the negative aspects of gaming. And so what I wanted to do today was, if we're going to be creating a game, we must have looked at the positive aspects of gaming as well. So I wanted to make myself familiar with that. And one of the things, Sam, that you talked about was that it produces grit. And that was one of the things that they said, if a person plays video games, then a lot of times that they develop like a stick-to-itiveness, right? So like you're not just, and it teaches like the importance of failure. So like if you, not importance of failure, but that failure is okay. So like if you're only playing, Chutes and Ladders with your family and your family lets you win, then Chutes and Ladders is a bad example because it's a game completely based on luck. But these ideas, I hate Chutes and Ladders, but if you play these games that, and you never learn failure. But in video games, from what I've seen, is in order to increase, you have to learn lessons, right? So like, if I want to get to the next round, I have to learn how to do this, this, and this.
How to get back
and
up
they
falling.
right and get back up and do it, and they build on one another. So like, in order to do well in this round, I have to succeed at this round. It's like a math thing, right? In order to get to this math level, I have to learn this math level, whatever. The other thing it does is it reduces impulsiveness in people, which I don't understand how that works, but it reduces impulsiveness. Now, what most of them say, most across the board, I read American Psychological Association and psychology, like just a lot, is these are based on people who play moderately.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so the positive effects are not people who are playing 5 to 10 hours a day. These are people who are moderately playing video games. But there is a lot of good that can come from video games. It can increase your creativity. It can help reduce anxiety. It can help reduce stress. Not me, but in other people. It can help boost your mood. And I think this is the dopamine that you guys were talking about a little bit, make you happier. So when you guys were creating heroes, you were obviously looking at this. And obviously, Sam, when we're creating heroes, we're not looking at this as something that's a negative side effect. We are encouraging moderation. And like you said, to take that break on Sabbath and make sure you're not playing constantly. But what were some of the things that you looked at when you were designing heroes and when you guys have played heroes that help build? I mean, I know that I learned a lot. It's in some trivia about the Bible that I hadn't thought of before. So what were some of the things in heroes that you were looking at?
That's a great question. The one thing that the thing that shocked me the most, let's say, is research on if you experience emotions inside a game, you are less likely to do it in real life. This was really shocking to me because I always told that people that play video games are often violent video games, become violent. And if you play, and I thought, okay, fine. If somebody plays violent video games become violent, then we can create video games where you can experience compassion and generosity and even, a desire to proclaim, to fulfill the mission of the church and so on. Then let's create a game that will emulate that. But the research says the exact opposite. People that play violent video games in moderation, a normal amount, they are less violent in real life because all of whatever anger they have, they put it into games. And And this shocked me. It's like, okay, so let's not build a game where they can experience compassion in the game, because then they will be less likely to do it in real life. And it kind of defined much of the strategy for Heroes. So the game was designed so that a regular playtime would be between 8 and 12 minutes maximum. And the minimum would be 1 to 3 minutes. So if somebody is a normal game session should be 1 to 3 minutes. You pick it up, you answer a series of questions, and you're done. A long stretch should be between 8 and 12 minutes. Although some people are so competitive, they really want to spend like 2 hours memorizing the questions and going forward and winning and so on, which is fine. You're spending that time, investing in this. But no one, for the first Heroes, spent more than 2 hours in a single game session. It just didn't happen. So embedded within the game is the limitation of how much you're going to get out of the game within a particular time frame. It is not built for 12 hours of gameplay. A lot of games are not built with this in mind. They are built so that if somebody spends 20 hours in a game, success. And I'm also, I don't know how much I should share about this, but my record is 36 hours without stop, without sleep. I ate, toilet, and came back. That was it. And I won't tell you what game that was. I was a teenager back then, but that's the level of addiction that I got to. Thankfully, God rescued me from that nonsense. And the limitations are important. It's like food. You can talk about the benefits of food, but if you binge eat all day long, you're going to die quickly. And it's the same with gaming. Something that can be good in moderation can be absolutely devastating in excess. And I think the same thing applies. In fact, that applies to almost anything that you consume in life. Maria, what are your thoughts in playing Heroes and the Bible knowledge and all of this? And why don't you tell us what you do in the project as a community manager?
Well, I'm just going to start with the last thing you said about what I do. The first thing I did to help with it is I was one of the people who went over the questions, and I made sure that they were worded properly and checked to make sure that they were accurate with the Bible or whatnot. But currently what I do is I help run the Discord server for Heroes, where people can upload issues that they might find, and then that helps the people who are developing find the issues easier and then helps to solve them. So that is what I do.
Tell us about Discord. What is that?
Well, Discord was well known for being a place where gamers could come together, and there's easy ways to talk, and there's different channels where you can talk about different subjects and join calls easily and exit easily. So it's a very community-centered place. So I found that having that for Heroes was very telling, because we wanted this to be a whole community where people could come together and play Heroes and learn more about everything together. So I thought that was very fitting for Heroes.
Excellent. We'll add the link of the Discord server down in the chat. No, in the description of the video. Yeah. There you go. That's what it's called. It's called a description. And we'll add it there. So if you want to join the Discord server, you can. And what's your feeling about the game and how you hope it will help people to reconnect with these characters?
Well, I have been in high school and I have Bible classes, but besides that, I have not been very involved in religious things besides like family worship and going to church and my classes for Bible. But ever since I've gotten this app, I've been a lot more involved with, wow, this is actually something that has happened here. And even though I've gone through 16 years of my life studying the Bible, there were things that I did not know. And I know of adults who have said the exact same thing. One of the few things that I loved about it, or one of the many things I loved about it, was that there were no in-app purchases. And for everyone who's a mobile gamer, you know that there's always something that's going to happen. And whether it's in-app purchases or in-game ads, there's always something. But there's nothing going on here. It's all stuff that you have to work and get yourself. So I loved that element of it, where it's like everything that is accomplished here is through my own hard work.
Yeah, that's important to bring out, because I know that's the most annoying thing, is like when you get all the way to a certain place and then they say, oh, if you want to do this, it's like what, $5.99 or $99. It's always just a little enough where you don't think much about it, right?
Yes. Oh, yes, that is
$99. You can. It's awesome that you guys have designed this, that we're not going to be asking people for money.
It's not an easy decision to make, Jennifer, because building a game is very expensive.
Yeah.
You know, the Heroes team has about over 20 people doing all different things and freelancers across the board. And it's not cheap to build a game. So the idea of monetizing it is very attractive because it creates, okay, let's monetize it. And then let's create a better version of this game coming forward, you know, later. But we decided against it. You know, whenever you, within Christianity, the more generous you can be, the more God opens doors in the future. And there is an example of this. There is an app called YouVersion of the Bible.
Mhm.
And this particular church that came up with that, it's not a huge church, but they decided that they were going to build the best app for reading the Bible. And so far, they spent $26 million on that app. But they have like 500 million users almost. And, you know, they've taken the Bible further than any other project had done before. Multiple versions, multiple languages, and it's all free. There's no cost anywhere. And God just kept opening doors for them. And we believe that generosity matters. So the game is free. There are no in-app purchases. There are no ads, you know, forever. And that's, yeah.
That's awesome. I have family friends who say you can't outgive God.
Yeah.
So Richard, the same question to you. Can you tell us a little bit about what you appreciate about Heroes and what you do with the project?
So as a QA specialist, I go through our system of tickets known as GitLab, and I go through the tickets and I test stuff that the developers have fixed, and I let them know if it has been fixed or if this needs to be worked on a little more. And I also help out with the release of the builds to send out to testers, so that we can get more people onto the game to see if there are any other issues that maybe we're not catching. And if they're enjoying it, that feedback can come to me as well, and I can let everyone else know, like, hey, we're doing a good job, we're heading in the right direction. Let's keep up, let's keep doing this to make the game better and as fun as possible. And the one thing I did appreciate about Heroes is how simple it is, but how effective it is as well. You know, you go into a game and there's nothing hard about it. You go into the game, you choose your effects, and then you just start the round. There's no extra little things or something. Like in other mobile games, you might be ready to start and then boom, an ad that you can't skip. And then it takes forever to even get into the game. And then boom, if you want to skip the ad, you have to pay for it. And so I'm just glad that there's nothing like that. And even when you get into the game, like, it's still challenging. Like you first have like your easy questions, right? Like how many sons did Noah have or something. But then you get to the end and there are questions that I looked at and I just kind of questioned, like, is this even in the Bible? Like, is this like an Ellen G. White writing, or is this something I haven't read yet? And I think that's really cool because it forces them to really be like, okay, well, like the Daniel effect, it allows you to look into what Bible verse it's from, and then it forces you to read and be like, oh, okay, well, that's something interesting, something new, and that little, like, it like ticks in your brain, like, oh, how cool. And so I think that challenging aspect really, it really like got to me, and it's been with me ever since I started on this project.
Richard, why don't you go through the effects?
Okay. So the first one, like I mentioned, is the Daniel effect, and that just when you tap it, it'll show up what verse you have or what verse the question is from. So it's pretty useful for people that look at a question and like, well, I don't want to use any of my other effects, or maybe I want to learn what story this is from, and so they can press the Daniel effect. And see where the verse is found. Then you have the Friday effect, which is it doubles the mana awarded by each correct answer. And so that helps a lot with people that are trying to grind and get higher or more mana so that they can get more effects and more uses for those effects. And then there's the Elijah effect, which gives you a double portion of XP.
Can you explain what XP is for somebody who, I mean, no
Sure.
one missed this conversation, but maybe they don't know what
Right. So XP is just a shortened version of experience. So the more experience you get, the effects start unlocking, and you start unlocking heroes. And in the game, in order to get more questions about maybe Ruth or John or Jesus, you have to level up. And you first start out with people such as Noah, Moses, and Joseph. Kind of like how in the Bible you're starting from Noah and then you kind of go up through the Bible.
In simple terms, experience is the more you play the game, the more it shows how far you've come.
Mm-hmm. And then mana is the currency that is used in the game to unlock these effects and to get more uses out of them. And then you have the Joshua effect, which is it freezes time for 5 seconds just as the sun stopped for Joshua. And I don't know if anyone else watching this video or even maybe one of you guys noticed, but these effects have something to do with the character or what it's like kind of talks about. So like with Daniel, when he was with the gift God gave him, he was able to reveal the dreams to the kings. With the Friday and with the Friday effect, it was just like when the manna fell from heaven for all the Israelites. Elisha asked for a double portion of his blessings, And so it's like I like how in the game we've incorporated the little like tidbits of the characters into the effects. Jonah effect allows you to skip questions, like Jonah tried to skip his mission, just like in his story.
they're witty too.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the Lazarus effect, which gives a second chance if you get an answer wrong. This one is very, very useful, especially in harder questions, because then you're kind of wondering like, oh, well, let me try this one, and if you didn't get it right, then you get to use the Lazarus effect, and it helps out a lot. Then you have the Abraham effect, which halves the possible answers as Abraham halved the animals. So again, it helps with those harder questions where you're kind of like, oh, I think it's one of these two, but I'm pretty sure it's not these. So you just have it. Maybe you get it right, maybe you won't. It's a 50-50 chance. So you just increased your chances of getting the question right. Then you have the Jesus effect, which removes your errors and shows the way. So it automatically shows you what is the correct answer, which is very reminiscent of, we try to follow Jesus, and if we do, we're put right in the right direction. And it's a very extremely useful effect as well for the game. And then Revelation effect halves your times if you get all answers correctly. So in the game, the way you decide how you win or how you have a better you just have to try and get a better time, the fastest time possible in answering these questions. So the Revelation effect helps with that a lot.
But it's very expensive to buy.
Yes, very expensive. You have to be high level and a lot of mana.
One of the things that was there for people, if they're wondering where they can get it, it's on Google Play and Apple in the App Store. If that was there.
Yeah, available for pre-order now, and it will be released January 28th. But you can go and pre-order if you go to the website. Of course, the link is in the description. You will be able to pre-order it. And at the moment, we still have a few beta tester openings. So if you want to try the game before it's fully released, you can sign up to be a beta tester, join the Discord server.
Come join us.
Yes.
So we're not ending the conversation. I just wanted to point that one little thing out. Obviously, as I'm listening to all three of you, you all have had experience with gaming, and I do think that it would only be fair for us to talk a little bit about some of the problems that come with it. But before we move on, I do want to ask you each, what do you love about it? And it doesn't have to just be about heroes, but like, what is something that you love about gaming? What is something that you find, like, why do you do it? Is it something that relaxes you, or do you find the social interaction important? Like, because I do think that there is a social aspect of it. What do you guys, all three of you, we can start with Moriah and then go to the gentleman.
The biggest thing for me, as I've said before, is community. At the beginning of quarantine, I got on Minecraft, and even though I was cut off from all my friends in real life, I met with a whole bunch of new people, and I was able to outreach and be close to them, and we developed an entire community online. And just like that with Heroes, I found that I've found myself in a brand new community where we all share the same values and we all care about the same things. And I've always just found that that's really nice. But whenever I play games, there's always people I can come back to and people I can play with.
That's awesome. Richard and then Sam.
One of the things I've enjoyed about gaming is the emotion behind those stories that they create. You know, it's just like reading a book or even watching a movie. There's always some kind of point to it, and there are certain games where it really like drives home a point. Like one particular game that I played, it was like a moral. There was a moral problem. Like, do you change the system from within, or do you do it by your own means? And the entire story kind of challenges the two thoughts. And so those are my particularly favorite kind of games, where it's not just the fun aspect, but it also makes me think a little more about, well, what would I do in that situation? And then just like Mariah, the community aspect, right? So just like like I said earlier, when I have my group, the Champions Lounge, some days when I'm just after I'm finished working on Heroes for a while, I'm getting kind of tired, I just send a text and be like, hey, who wants to just talk or vibe or just play some Mario Kart, and then we'll just get on and we'll just have fun. And so that the community is definitely a huge part of gaming to me.
That's awesome.
I don't know. I think every genre it has a different offering and something that I like a lot. For example, you have some genres you have to build something and develop something. So the application of resources, you generate resources, then you use them effectively to grow whatever a village or an army or whatever it is that you're developing. And I have learned so much about operating with limited resources just from playing for hours and hours. So the byproduct of the game is that you learn what to do in real life, and you go through a faster iteration of learning processes. So in other words, how many hours can you spend making mistakes in the real world before you collapse or go bankrupt? In the game, you can make many mistakes many times, and in fact, you learn from them much faster as you progress. Another type of game is a very story-based. Usually, console games are very story-based, where there is a story. And I'm playing a game right now, and it's very emotional. The main character loses his son, and he's a young son. And you go through all of these emotions that the character is going through, and then you have to make moral decisions based on those things. So games, in a way, they help you experience life in a way that is safe, so that if that ever happens to you in the real world, you can react properly according to your values. And so the idea that you need to subdue to the values of the game makers, to some degree, that happens, and you should avoid those games. If the only way to go through is to be deceiving and to do the wrong things in the game, that's not a good game. If, however, you get to choose, and the best games, you get to choose how you're going to react to different circumstances. That's another way. Then trivia helps you with knowledge and to get yourself in the mindset of those questions or those themes. So I think every genre offers something different. Yeah.
I think that these are all great reasons, and I think for me sometimes when I have played, it has been nice to sort of shut off a little bit from sort of. I think that when you start thinking all day long, like we think all day long, it's nice to have like a focused mind on something that's, I don't want to say not important, because I mean the games that I'm usually attracted to have no consequence in them whatsoever. So that kind of thing, it's nice to just shut your brain off for like 15-20 minutes and zone out of whatever you're doing. But I'm sure there are people who are watching this and they're saying, you guys are painting a pretty picture of what gaming is. But in my experience, or what I've read in the news or what I've seen in commercials, it's a dangerous thing, and they have bad things, bad games, and they teach bad morals, and people are like Sam, you said that the perception is that if you play violent video games that you are in fact a violent person. If you get angry during video games, that means you're an angry person. And you actually just explained my entire interaction with some video games in that moment, because as we were talking before, I said, when I play this racing game, I get really angry when I play it. I but in general, I wouldn't consider myself an angry person or even an emotional person. So it's specific to this game. So you actually helped me, Sam, today with that. But when you guys are playing, there are video games that as Christians, we probably should stay away from. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
That there are
Yes.
some that might be considered dangerous.
Yeah.
And some behavior that's dangerous. Can you guys talk a little bit more about that?
From what I can picture, and from what the values that my parents have instilled in me is, I personally would never play anything that has demons or any kind of supernatural things of that kind of standard, just because I know my brain gets affected by things easily, and I have gotten nightmares from just reading things, even printed in Guide magazine, which is, the good safe place. But I know that my mind can be easily affected by those things, so I try to avoid them as much as possible.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's the same way that Sam was talking about, how when there are certain games where you're not given a choice, right? You have to do the wrong thing in order to succeed. So you might have to deceive that people in your team just so that it works for your own gain. So those kind of games I kind of stray away from, because it doesn't reflect who I am and what my values are. And I want to be able to work on them, and being a part of that doesn't really help at all. And another thing that is very hard, like you were saying, like how you get angry at games. Like some people get super angry and they'll throw their controller or they'll punch their screen, and it's like, well, then you have to kind of like sit down and think to yourself, like, why did I like do that? And so some people get so invested into it that it causes that part of their character to come out. And I think it's something that really needs to be looked at and be very cautious about.
So I'm kind of listening to you, and what is striking is how much self knowledge or a knowledge of what your limitations are, or self-awareness, I guess would be a good term, about what impacts you, is a very important thing to have as you're like playing video games or as you're gaming, as it is with everything. But
that's part of that iterative process, Jennifer, of you put yourself in situations that you don't normally in real life. When is it in real life? You're talking about Mario Kart. When is it that you put yourself in competitions where there's a very clear winner and a very clear loser? In real life, you don't. It's not part of what you do. In fact, you try to avoid that as much as possible. Now, if you were put in that situation in real life, you probably react in a similar way. So now that you have learned that about yourself, you can now try to react differently in the game and learn those things there, so that when you do meet this in real life, you are trained for it. You've rehearsed it in the process. And then you don't become a victim of your own reactions. Because it's very easy to hold a controller. It's much harder to control yourself in all those situations. I would say that
are very good at bringing out emotions, and the more you can recognize the emotions that you're experiencing, the more you can adjust them to how you would react in the real world.
Yeah. And I would say that there are a couple of dangers here. One is the kind of game, and the other one is the exposure that you have to those games, that really in terms of minutes and hours. So games that make use of language that you wouldn't normally use for me, are a problem. You know, biblical principle, let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. And if in the game, 3 out of 10 words are swear words and, you know, words that you wouldn't normally use, but don't play that game, because, you know, if you're exposed to it for long enough, that will become the way you think. Be careful what you put into your bodies, because it will come out. You know, that's a principle in computers: garbage in, garbage out. So that's one thing that is important. The other is the sheer amount of time that you spend doing it. Every game needs to create its own framework of how the world inside that world works, whatever that is. So even if you're playing Among Us, you know, you're inside, there's a very specific set of rooms and etc. And you enter that world. So if you play for a couple of minutes here and another 10 minutes there, that's one impact. If you spend 12 hours a day for 6 days playing Among Us, what will happen is that you'll become very good at it. But you will start to interpret the real world through the lenses of the framework given by the game. So when I was a teenager, I played the first GTA, which stands for Grand Theft Auto, which was a very much a simple game from the top, and you drive and you have to steal cars, and the whole point is stealing. And I shouldn't have. Now, not only did I play something I shouldn't have, I played it for too many hours. And then I had to walk. And as I was walking out of the house to, you know, go somewhere else after a whole session of playing, guess what came into my mind?
I want to steal that car.
Why am I walking? It would be much easier if I could just, you know, take this car. And that's the point, that you know that you're doing something wrong. When your thoughts are pushing you toward a reality that isn't God's reality, you're spending more time in where you shouldn't. So I try to have a 1 to 4 rule, which is for every 1 hour of interaction with any secular environment, I need to have 4 hours of interaction with the Bible. And that helps to dictate which worldview is influencing, you know, who is influencing who. And that's a principle that works for me. It's a very high, you know, 1 to 4 is quite a big ratio. Maybe others would have a different ratio, but I think that from the moment the game starts influencing the way you see the world, you've been playing too much.
That's a really great principle to have. And that goes across the board with probably everything. And next week we're talking about screen time, but I think, like, when we're talking about the way we spend our time, even in TV, like if you know, we're consuming any type of media, and it starts impacting the way we view the world. And I think a lot of people, I have a very interesting take on that, even with romantic movies that we can get into on another episode. Wholesome romantic movies that could in fact affect the way that women see the world and the way that we relate to each other. So everything that's a good principle to have is, how does it impact the way we see the world, but specifically with gaming. Because I do see when you start playing games, and I've actually had to delete stuff off my phone, like just stuff that I would play once in a while, and then I would be like, oh, if I can just beat this silly round. And look, this like puzzles, right? I'm not like talking even about like story stuff, or if I can beat this round, and then it becomes something I'm like, I just have to get rid of it for myself, because otherwise I'm gonna completely become not worth anything throughout the day. And so I think that that's something important. And I think it goes back to what all three of you have been saying, is a self-awareness. Like, how is this impacting my actions? How is it impacting the way I treat other people? How is it impacting my anger or my behavior? Because you're right, Sam, if I use bad language, or if I have bad thoughts during a video game, and I'm spending most of my time playing video games, then when I leave, am I still using that language?
Yep.
Am I applying that same thought process to people in my everyday life? And how does that impact how I love the people around me?
Yeah.
I think that's been really good.
Let me give you an interesting anecdotal, well, something that happened at home. I was very worried about 18 months ago that none of my boys, I have 3 boys, they are now 10, 9, and 6. None of them got into Minecraft. 18 months ago, they were just not into Minecraft. I try to push them, play something that is helpful. And they played for a bit, like 5 minutes. They didn't get it, and then they stopped. Now, I never played Minecraft, and I don't get it either. So for me to encourage them, it's complicated. But I see that children that don't play games like Minecraft will be severely under resourced as a new generation, for a very simple reason. If a child, when they come of age, when they're 20 something, if they're young now and by the time they're 20 something, if they don't have an ability to experience spatially virtual spaces, and they don't have the ability to program, and they don't think like a programmer, they will be severely under resourced for the job market and for what society will need in these 15, 20 years. And that's something that I was worried about. Now, finally, one of them got into Minecraft. He spent half an hour into it. And now it's amazing. I have to limit the amount of time they spend on it, obviously. But they build incredible things. They build entire mechanism with this thing called redstone, where, is it redstone?
Yeah.
Help me. Okay? See, I'm learning here. So
I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm like, what is
creating special gates, and then looked at it. I'm going to throw an arrow, and then he throws an arrow. When it hits this thing, then all of these other things happen. You've got torches that light up and gates that open and entire mechanisms that are, this is a very low version of programming. You do this, then that happens, and so on. And so this ability to think in this particular way will help them later, as society now will demand that this is a must. When I was a teenager, I grew up in Brazil, there was no option but to speak English. By the time my generation grew up, those that could not speak English in Brazil, that was going to be a problem. So my parents invested for me to go and study in England, to study English, because English was important. I believe that today, programming is the equivalent of English. That in the global economy, if you don't know how to program, you will have a problem, finding a job or finding things, even if it has nothing to do with programming, the work that you do. Now, to us, Jennifer, that generation is totally different. We don't need to program, thankfully, but new ones do.
Programming.
When
I think of that, I think of like programming languages like C++ and Python, but that is not my strong suit at all. So what exactly are you meaning by that?
The ability to think programmatically. So object-oriented programming, for example. I want this to happen with my fridge. Fridges will be programmable in that period of time, and all sorts of devices at home. Today we have Alexa, for example. You can program Alexa to do all sorts of things in the house. I think I demoed this before. I can program Alexa to turn my lights on and off. The ability to do that is incredibly important. Whether you're familiar with a programming language, such as C++, Objective-C, or whatever other language, Python, etc., that's a secondary issue. I mean, if you have it, it's very beneficial because you can make it rain. But apart from that, you still need to think programmatically. How do I make this thing happen and that thing happen? And this is the moment where grandparents go to their grandchildren who are barely teens, and they get to do all these magical things for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean, Marie. It's this. Yeah.
And I don't think we're totally past it, Sam. I think your ability to even think or figure it out in that way, I think we're on the tail end of it. But there are times when even we come up with things that we need to use or be available for. And even though we were raised in a different generation, that we have to sit down and think to ourselves, it may take the generation behind us 15 minutes quicker than it takes us, and it probably takes the generation behind them a couple minutes quicker to get it. But I think it's even us. I mean, I'll this is such a stupid example of how much this is. Like when we were growing up, everything. I mean, I think like on the computer was Solitaire and Minesweeper. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Minesweeper. And a big thing I remember when I went to HVA, which is a boarding school in Hagerstown, Maryland, where I was raised, and they got a game on the computer, and it was SimCity, but it wasn't SimCity like it was now. It was a literal building of towns. It wasn't like
I remember.
now you lived in this town or whatever, and you could have these cheats, right? And you could get like all the money and just build your crazy town within like 15 minutes. And we were amazed by this, but everything we did, we wrote down. We didn't type it into our computer. And so even learning for us, like, okay, Evernote, which is or our content management with Monday, it's not intuitive. And this is such a small example. The kids coming behind us, I look at my niece and nephew, at the opportunities they have and the way their minds work, and that they're learning at such a young age to think in a way that I will never be able to think. Even if I was a gamer, if you've played more video games, Sam, than I have, you'll never be able to think in the same way that they are,
No.
because the exposure, I mean, like, is insane, and the opportunities that they will have is so far beyond us.
We have a game. We have an Xbox game that we play here at home, and I've been playing for 20 years, more 30 years. 30 years I've been playing games. And my 11-year-old, last week, I had to concede that he's better than I am.
Yeah.
And he's been playing for a couple of years. And this is a hard thing. Of course, the dream of every son is to get better than their father at everything. And I thought I was going to wait a bit longer for this. But no, I have to give him the controller to finish some missions because I can't do it. And I'm amazed by this. And I think it's wonderful. What we need, Jennifer, is a new generation of young people that are willing not just to play games, but are willing to make games that will fulfill the mission that God has given us. Games are very, very important. So here's the appeal to you. It's unlikely that a teenager is listening to this podcast, but if you are,
if you're listening to this and you have teenagers, ask them to listen to it.
There you go. And encourage them to get into game development. If you're an illustrator, you can be in game development. If you like editing audio, you can be in game developer. Pretty much every art form is necessary in building a game. And Heroes is just a stepping stone to more games that would do even more wonderful things in proclaiming these three angels' messages we are committed to proclaiming from the book of Revelation. So we need not just gamers, we really need game makers, game developers. And if you want to be involved, then you can join us in whatever capacity. We've got Morea here who taught me about Discord. I had heard about it before, but she basically went and set it all up, and she's leading the entire community for this great game, and she's still in high school. Richard finished high school, now looking at college and so on, and he's leading all of the QA. And part of this strategy is that we build a new generation of people that are willing to use all of their talents to fulfill the mission of the church, even by making games. There are no limits to this total involvement of all of our members, no matter what their age is. So this is an appeal to everyone. That there are new frontiers that we need to cross, and we need to encourage new generations to do it.
Right. If people are saying the church doesn't need young people, we do need young people, and we need them in this way. So,
Morea, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I know we've said a lot of things about, gaming, and we've related that to teenagers a lot. But I know a lot of parents, and my parents included, they want to feel a lot more connected with their children. And gaming is a really easy way that you can connect with your kids. And even though you might look at it and it might be very intimidating at first, if you just pick something up, I'm just going to put Minecraft out there. It's a very simple game. And once you get the basics down, it is completely open. There are many different things you can do. And just having your kids seeing you put the effort in trying to see something that they enjoy, they will look at you in a whole new light. And I remember back when my mom first started letting us play Minecraft, and she was like putting an effort into doing it. She bought her own Minecraft account. My sisters and I were ecstatic. We were like, our mom's going to play Minecraft with us? So it's something like the average age of an American gamer is 35. So it's not just teenagers that are out here. And while we do need lots of young people and we need to influence them into doing things that can benefit the future, if they can see you putting an effort into doing the things, they will take after you.
Wow.
It's a great thing to say. Amen. I think that's a great place to leave it. Richard, would you pray for us? And then that will be it for us today.
Yeah, sure. Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you that you've given each and every one of us in our day of life. Lord, we thank you for the ability to converse about a whole frontier that is possible to spreading your word and getting your message out to as many people as possible. We ask for your help and for the opportunities to come, for those doors to open, for people to see that this is a new way and maybe possibly a good and effective way to reaching younger people, to reaching adults, to reaching kids, to reaching any kind of age demographic. And we ask you to be with us in our work, in our projects, in our plans for future games, to spread your word and your light to a world in darkness. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Richard and Mariah, and as always, Sam, for being with us today. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and we will be back next week. We're going to talk about screen time, which is related to this, but a little bit different. So we will see you next week. God bless.